Okay, you're going to open our meeting for us.
Hei te koe. Minoi tātou. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga I te mea ngaro, ki rungi tēnā ki tēnā o tātou, kia mahia te huamā kihikihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te aroha, toi tēnei kaupapa, tūturu whiti whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e hui e tai.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
It's great to have you on the team.
I was just saying, those cards that got given out to all the staff is quite handy with different karakia on there.
You think we could do it ourselves?
Yeah.
No. I'll get Councillor Bailey to do that next time.
Oh, no.
I will agree. I'll support that as long as Councillor Graham uses the wider.
Do we have any apologies? Mike Mohi and Fenton, you're going to leave early off to Wellington?
Right at the end of the meeting at lunchtime.
Lunchtime?
Yeah, just before.
Oh, right at the end of the meeting at lunchtime? Okay. Any other apologies?
Whatever
Rick,
comes
you have got a doctor's appointment later on the day, haven't you?
Yeah, 3:30.
But we should be fine by then. Okay. Anyone, someone to move in those apologies? I'll move since you apologise, Fenton. Whatever. Oh, since you're one, just accept the apologies. Okay. All those in favour, aye. Any notices?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just notice of absence from the country from the 30th of July to the 25th of August, and seeking permission to do so.
Taking a nice long holiday, eh? Oh, well done. Certainly, thank you very much for that. We will accept that.
So you'll give me permission?
You absolutely have permission to
Thank
go
you.
on a long holiday. Any other notices? Okay, we'll just move to conflict of interests. Are there any new conflict of interests that have arisen over the last month? Otherwise, I doubt very much. And everyone's done their new sheet. That is excellent. We'll move to the minutes. We'll have a copy of the minutes. We have a mover for the minutes to be accurate. Need someone to put their hand up. Two, Councillor Bevan and Councillor Wilson. Are there any comments on the minutes? We have a mover. Okay, all those in favour of accepting the minutes, the last meeting?
Aye.
Carried. Okay, follow-up items from the item 4. Any follow-up items? Leanne, are you going to... is there any comment on the follow-up items?
So, Chair, they have all been completed, and the information requests from councillors are provided in the paper, so we're happy to take any questions in relation to any of those.
I just have a quick comment that that dam, that new landslide, that's amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. Debbie?
Done that at Ruatanapa, a piece of cake. You know?
Yeah, I know.
Looks a bit similar.
It's just amazing what you can do with no money, no 100 million. Any other comments on follow-ups? Peter?
You're just looking at item 5, which is the... Sorry, I might have... No, sorry, item 7. No, 8, the last one, the NCC Stormwater Strategy. So they're coming to make a presentation to the Environment on Services Committee. Was it planned to invite the Ahuriri Management Committee members to that presentation? Because I think they should be there.
Very good idea.
It's a good suggestion.
Make that happen. As a matter of fact, could we invite the whole governance group? Yeah, that you're talking about, their governance group.
Committee.
Yeah. So that includes the Hastings one, Tani, as well. Okay, let's make that happen. Fenton?
Just the letter number 4, have you finalised that or not yet? The eeling, I'd be interested to see how you crafted that.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was to see if I could get a bit more support, but on reflection when I read that, I think I'm going to run with what it is, just get it going, especially considering issues that have happened. There is a lot of support. I've had a lot of verbal support. I've had nobody against it, so I think we'll just run the cutter and the letter. Do you want to see the letter before I send it?
Wouldn't mind.
Okay. Any other issues on follow-ups?
Just, Mr Chair, item 5, the forestry/management, that's a consideration of current consent conditions effectiveness. In addition to that, are there any other proposed conditions precedents that are looking to be inserted into forestry management? Is there a plan to do more than simply review consent conditions?
Yes, there is, through you, Mr Chairman. Yes, there is. We have very few current consents for forestry, but the National Environment Standard for plantation forestry has certainly increased the level of regulation required, and so we'll be looking at what you can expect to see in terms of the ongoing management as well. And there are responsibilities which fall with the district councils, and we're working with them, so this will effectively be a joint paper, or there'll certainly be coverage of their requirements as well.
Through you, Mr Chair, but the intent is to not only present a review in September of current consent conditions, is to consider issues going forward around that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other issues regarding the follow-ups? No? Do we have to move to... do we have a move just to...
I'll move, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Neil, second. Paul, all those in favour?
Right.
Aye. Move to call for minor items not on the agenda.
Mr Chairman.
Alan?
Yes, could someone please give us an explanation and the facts of what happened in relation to this walnut tree massacre incident?
It's an issue where facts are a little bit interesting. You want a report from the council staff on that?
I'd like someone who knows to tell us about it.
Okay.
Just a report on the LGNZ conference, very briefly.
Yeah, I would like to do that too.
Are you both on it? Well, we'll do both you, eh?
We might do 3 of us. See if Fenton was listening.
We won't do 3.
Well, nothing left to say, Chair.
No. So, do we have any other business not on the agenda? Not Tom?
Napier City Council's response to our LTP submission.
Fenton?
Sure, I do have one. Australian forestry extraction regulation.
Look forward to that. Okay, we have about 7 items, do we? We've got them all recorded. Then we will move on to our decision items. And the first one we have is a presentation from Bill and Catherine. Do you wish to come up to the front? I'd like to welcome you here. Thank you very much for taking your time out.
I'll get down the back. All right.
Down the back, Tom, where you belong.
I don't know why it's not.
Thank you. No, the floor is yours. Everyone would have read your paper, and I think a lot of people have been around the council table, have visited your communities, especially Debbie, of course, and concerned about the issues that you're facing personally. So we're really looking forward to this presentation and trying to get our heads around what we do. And I've had several conversations with Lawrence about it. And what we agreed last night is what we need to do is get a practical solution around how we solve this problem for you guys. So looking forward to your presentation.
Well, I'm going to lead the way, mainly because I've been involved with this water problem in Ongaonga, 2004. 2003, we had a dry winter. And in 2004, the orbital sprinkler started going and everything else. And we also had a dairy farm down the road from us put in a 10-inch bore, 300 feet into the ground. And he ran it half an hour a day and went round checking everybody's bore. No, not touching it. Okay, that's fine. And then he turned it on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Naturally, the aquifer went like that and we had trouble. The regional council organised a meeting at the local golf club, and there was a hydrologist, Brooks, I think his name was, Tom Brooks. He was a Canadian or American and hydrologist, and he said, oh, he's in a different aquifer to you. Is that right? Yep. And he said, he's down 300 feet, you're only 120, our bore's 120. That's right, yeah. And I said, well, how can he come up with the fact that he's in a different aquifer? Because Ruataniwha Plains are alluvial, created over millenniums by the two rivers. There's no rock layer between anything. And if he makes a hole in the water down there, my water's going to go down to it. That's automatic. I got poo-pooed a wee bit at the meeting, but that's fine. I'm quite prepared to stand up to that. And this, then in 2012, 2011 it had been the dry winter. In 2012, we had 5 houses ran out of water on the 28th of December. At that stage, I had the audacity to ring the regional council and got Mr. Maxwell. And he said to me, oh, well, I'll look into this and I'll ring you back. And I said, no, you won't. Get in a car and come down to my place. He did.
He always does what he's told. It's a really good thing about him.
He did. And I had Debbie there, Peter Butler, the mayor. I had 4 people that ran out of water. And I covered my backside by having a reporter there as well. Now, unfortunately, I did have to apologise to Debbie afterwards because one of the people that had run out of water got quite nasty and was swearing, and I don't agree with that. That wasn't what it was about. But Mr. Maxwell sat on my terrace and told me that they'd given out consents for 240 million cubic metres of water. There will be no more. So this is what's prompted this petition, was this in our Mail paper. Billions at stake in big water grab, user state claim for water. This is Trench 2. Now, our concern is the people in Ongaonga have already spent in excess of 100,000, and I'm being quite minimal when I say 100,000, to maintain water into their houses. Now, that village has been there since 1890 something, and originally each house had a bricked-in well, 18 feet deep, and they could get all the water they needed. Some situations at Onga there, one lady, solo mother, her well collapsed. She then got a group in to drill a hole. They put a 4-inch bore down for her, $12,000. Then a pump couldn't get the water from the bore, so she had to buy a submersible. And the submersible, I know, cost around $6,000, because I've had to put one in myself, 6,800, because we had 3 houses fed off the one bore, and we just couldn't be without water. I mean, so that's not going to happen. To spread it a little bit further, we get to Tiko.
I'll talk about Tiko.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you do that one. And so, hence, you can understand why we decided to do something about it. I gathered the people in Onga, and they signed the list without question. And Catherine here helped me with Tiko.
Yes.
So I'll let Catherine carry on and...
Do you want me to stand up?
No, you don't have to stand up.
Right, thanks for giving us some of the history. I think what we're looking for is for some leadership around the water situations that we have in Onga and Tiko. Talking about Tiko, I've only been there for 5 years. We've had some very dry summers. We were really lucky last year that we didn't have as dry. The year before, even our fire station ran out of water. The forestry had been cut down a couple of years behind at the back and was earmarked as a fire hazard. They said that if the forestry caught on fire at the other end and the wind was blowing towards the village, that nobody would be able to stop it. And the only thing we had to put it out with is the school swimming pool. I know that you came down and saw us then, Rex. You actually came to Onga with Alex Walker, and there was some discussion about what we were going to do long term. I think for so long people had said when the dam comes, our bores would be fine. That year we had bores that were 60 metres down that were running out of water. We're predominantly elderly. I'm very lucky in my house. I have tanks. So when I run out of water, I can get it tanked in from Otani. But there are a lot of people that have been in their homes 40 plus years with bores that they keep going down and they keep going down, and they're running out of water, and there's no plan. There's no something for everybody to say, right, collectively as two townships that are running out of water, how are we going to, what do we suggest that we do forward? Do we all keep drilling deeper? Because the feedback that we're getting from people like Alistair Seta is that the Ruataniwha Basin is all linked. So if it's coming out of the bottom, then it's coming out, it's coming out of the top as well. So what is a long-term solution for our two villages? Our district council chose not to put us in the water plan because we're not on town water, and even though they brought it up in the long-term plan, it was suggested that we should start paying for town water, which was a bit of a crazy idea, but it was a good situation for us to actually say, hey, we want to be listened to. And why I really don't think, and I hope that you wouldn't go ahead with this tranche 2. Again, I think it's a really good thing for the problems with our water to be looked at, because if people in other places don't have drinking water, there's help. When we don't have drinking water, there's nothing. You know, we've got pensioners that are buying bottled water to fill their kettles because their bores are running empty, and we're now heading towards summer, 2 years after we all had a meeting, still with no plan. So what I'd like is somebody, I know that Lawrence wrote to you, we had a really good meeting with Lawrence, and he suggested that something like the tank scheme was done in Central Hawke's Bay, and I think that would be fabulous. But, you know, we need somebody to take leadership with this. We need somebody to tell us what to do. We're not looking for handouts. We're not looking for... we're just looking for leaders, and that's why we've come to you.
Well, maybe James just might like to just inform the meeting of the ability under the long-term plan to have tanks for under resilience.
Can I just comment first? Before we do that, I've talked to Lawrence about the tank. I think that... first of all, I know Onga and Tiko have been there a long time. My father lived there 70 years ago in Tiko. So, you know, these are precious communities, and we're going to make sure that they stay there. So you have our commitment. We are not going to abandon you. And it is about leadership, and you can form a tank process, and maybe the council agree on that, but I really do think we need to fight to put a group of really smart people together, like our Mr. Maxwell down there, and say, come up and tell us what the solution is, because the people, councillors around this table don't know what that solution is going to be. We need experts to tell us how we solve this problem.
Yes.
And, you know, you can have a big conversation about that, but actually it's going to come down to some serious people who know what they're talking about, how we solve it, to keep those communities there and to keep water in your kettles and in your showers. So we're not going to abandon you.
Awesome.
That's the first thing you need to know. Now, do you want to say something on Debbie's comment?
Look, two quick points. First of which is we recognise following the failure of the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme to proceed that there was a need to revisit Plan Change 6, the Tukitoki Plan, and staff gave advice late last year to the Regional Planning Committee that we should revisit the plan. Unfortunately, that was not supported. I think Lawrence Yules made another call for the plan to be revisited. I think we would be more than happy to have a further conversation with either with the council or with the Regional Planning Committee about revisiting the plan, because there are a number of issues that need to be looked at, and ultimately the allocation of the resource and the extent to which it's impacting on the supply there is a function of the resource management, or the regional resource management plan, and the chapter for Tukitoki. So that's a priority, but it's also something that will take some time. In the shorter term, I think we need to look at what other solutions are available. One of those, which Councillor Hewitt's just referenced, is we now have, as of the 1st of July this year, the ability to provide funding for water storage, water tanks for households, and that will need to be paid off over time on the rates bill so that it's recovered. But if upfront payment and the upfront cost of that is an impediment to households in either Tikokino or Ongaonga, then we have the ability to help out, if you like, to get them in for this summer,
Right.
and then have them paid off, say, over the next 10, 15 years, thereabouts. So,
And can you give me some information about how people can do that? And I'll let them know.
We'll follow up with that. That piece of it's a brand new policy. It went live a couple of weeks ago,
Right.
And so the specifics of it are just being worked on right now. And there is a paper coming to council, I think, the Environment Services Committee, next month, that will get agreement on the policy.
Yeah.
So you might just need to give us a few weeks to get things sorted, but that is certainly
Because we don't always get rain. Like the year before last, I have 2 very large tanks, and that wasn't enough to keep us.
Understood.
And we probably had the tank come in maybe 6 times through the summer. But what a lot of people are finding that do have bores is when the irrigation goes on, their bores stop.
Understood.
So if they were tanks that could be filled up from their bores,
Yes.
when the irrigation's turned off, because it usually goes in 12-hour thingies,
Yes.
they would be able to fill them.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's probably a good practical short-term solution while we work on the longer-term water allocation issues in the district.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Can I?
Rick, you come in, then Rick has got a question. Bill.
I was just going to commend Mr. Stevenson, because I saw him, I think, about 2004.
Correct.
On exactly the same issue, and commend you for being a strong advocate for your community. I just want to reiterate the story he said, because I did come in a former life in a different capacity to this council to take the issue up. And his position was that for all of these decades, that people knew that their bores pumped water all the time without exception. There was no one on Ongaonga who could recall ever having the bores run dry, until a dairy farm down the road put in a 10-inch bore and started to pump continuously. Now, it was said to me by the regional council staff then that there was no correlation at all, no connection, that they were in a different aquifer. To which I said, well, it seems to me that if you put something into the low down into the bath and take water out of it, you're going to affect the water at the top of the bath. Water runs downhill. It obeys gravity. To which there was some other discussion, and I never got, in my view, a satisfactory answer. The point I think we have to remember here, out of this, is that our knowledge of what goes on underground is very limited. We think we know it all, but I don't think we do. And I think from here, what we must take as a council is a precautionary approach, as Mr. Stevens outlined. Before we go and start allowing large tanks, we need to be very clear about what's going to happen around. And if there is, at some point, an effect which then adversely affects the people who are around, we must have the ability to go and reverse the consent that we've granted or relook at it. Because you can't tell me that taking 10 inches of water out of the aquifer only a short distance from where they live has had no effect at all. I mean, I'm just that cynical. I'm sorry.
But I just think we need to be more careful about how we do these things.
Well, Bill, and then come to you back to Peter.
Well, I'd like to raise something, it's a little bit historical. We used to have an irrigation system, forest.
Exactly right.
And there was a water race that
Yep.
came off the top of the Tookie,
Yep.
meandered down all the farms and gave them water for their stock. It went round the golf club at Ongaonga. I know that well because I lost my golf ball in it several times. There used to be trout in it and freshwater crayfish and the best, can't think of the crop, watercress, the best you could get in the world. Absolutely beautiful. And farmers bitched over the cost being landed on them for repairing the inlet up the top. So the regional council stopped it. And that was in 2001. It had been running for 94 years. And that water race actually kept the upper aquifer full. It leaked. There was a certain amount went into the aquifer and that kept it going. Now what happened was all the farmers that had used that water for their stock suddenly had to put bores in to set up troughs to water their stock. That's fine. Then the entrepreneurial types decided, oh, we can put a big one in and we can irrigate. So that's how it started. Now, Mr. Maxwell, when he came to me in 2012, gave a figure of how much they had given consents for. The question I asked him at that stage, did you know how much water was there in the first place? And he couldn't answer that question. And that should have been the key to consents going out. I've had occasion to ring him recently over a farmer that I saw down the road putting in a new bore, and I said, I believe there's no more consents. They put in a 10-inch bore. They went down 300 feet, and it was a dry one. They didn't get any water. The same farmer, further down his farm now, has got a drill rig sitting in the paddock, and it's working sometimes. And when you've gone through the trauma that we have of water and water problems, and you drive out of your home and here's these big sprinklers going full bore on a day, hot day with the wind blowing, and you know damn well that only about 40% is going to get to the ground, the rest of it's gone. It's a sheer waste. It makes you angry that we've had to go through that drama. So I think the consenting process has to be looked at and monitored to make sure it's not being raped, because that's what's happening to the aquifer. It's being raped to the extent that it's put pressure on everybody to get water supplies. And I think it's a serious problem. And I go back to my father-in-law many years ago. He said, you know how we've got countries going around fighting wars over oil? He said, not in my lifetime, maybe in yours, but it'll be in your grandchildren's, that they'll be fighting over water. And I'm afraid that's the level it's got to.
Peter.
Thanks, Chair. A comment and then a question. You've mentioned Tranche 2 water, and I know that there's considerable concern about the possibility of Tranche 2 water being issued by the council. We don't actually have the capacity to say no to that, because under Plan Change 6, the Commission, the Board of Inquiry, decided that there could be an extra 15 million cubic metres of water allocated under Tranche 2 under certain conditions, and we can't just say no to an applicant. We actually have to go through a process to enable them to present a case which we have to, as a council, consider. So we don't actually have any choice but to receive applications for that water and consider them and see if they can fit within the conditions that were set by the Board of Inquiry. So there's a process that we don't have any choice but to follow as a council. So please bear that in mind in regard to Tranche 2 water. It's got a process to go through.
We understand, and I think we covered that in our thing, because what we're saying is if you're going to say yes to Tranche 2, then I think that the people that are taking the water that will then leave us without it are going to have to pay something towards us being able to get water.
We're not saying yes. We're not saying yes, but we have to go through a process.
So currently it's on hold, isn't it? And how long is it on hold for?
Well, Liz can answer that.
Hi, it's on hold. We have asked the applicants to provide some additional information, and that's particularly around the whole concept of augmenting. So if they take X amount, they have to use a certain percentage of that to augment the waterways. And so it's really they're doing an exercise to understand the impacts of, now that we know where the applications have been made for, it's not just theoretical, it's actual. We can look at where they are. So we can look at the impacts of the takes in the vicinity of each of those takes, but also we've asked them to look at them more broadly as well. Now, the best indication that we have, and as because I think I presented this to the Environment and Services Committee a few weeks ago, that the findings are at least 2 to 3 months away. So it's going to be on hold at least until then. Once we have that information, then we'll make an assessment about whether or not their consents are publicly notified. And if they are, then people have the opportunity to submit on them. So that's just where we're at the moment.
All right.
So,
Okay, so, sorry, I had a question as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we'll go to Tom.
So, just in relation to the issue that Mr Stevenson's raised here today about a bore opening down the road, and that's, I think you said in 2004, and that's when the problem started. Do we know what that bore is and whether it's operating within its consent conditions? That's question one. And question two, when is our opportunity to consider the consent conditions? What's the time frame for renewal of consents for that bore?
So the first part of it is we will somewhere on record. I mean, I don't know personally the details at this stage to give you that, but we will have on record the water take consent as well as a bore permit, and we will have compliance monitoring regime for that. In terms of the renewal of the consent, again, I would have to actually go to the file and have a look. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Okay, so you can't answer it now, but I'm wondering if we could at least supply this information to these folk, because it's not going to be difficult for us to find it.
Tom.
So, as Liz has said, at the Environment Committee meeting on the 4th of this month, there was a discussion of the Tranche 2 water situation, and as hopefully clear from the last set of comments, nothing's going to happen quickly on this issue. The burden that the applicants have to bear to provide evidence that they are not having an impact on surrounding water or on the freshwater resource as well is going to be a pretty high burden, one would think, given the practical realities and evidence that you all are putting forward. Further, the staff makes a decision as to whether, if those were to proceed, they would be, the applications would be publicly notified for a hearing process and so forth. As a counselor, I would be horrified if, in the face of dozens of people in your community attesting to an impact that they are facing from heavy water users having this kind of impact, that this was not a publicly notified process. It would be horrifying. I'm speaking out of school, and I don't particularly care. That would be my view of the matter. So I think the concern about the Tranche 2 water is a perfectly legitimate concern in my mind, but it's not going to roll out of the blue and clobber anybody. It's going to be a contested process. At that meeting, I asked for the applicants to be identified. I have not yet received that. That's public information. People who apply for consents, we get a weekly report on who applies for consents, and I would like to see that list sooner rather than later as to who exactly is doing this. In a previous battle in Central Hawke's Bay, an Information Act request was filed about who held water consents and what volumes were involved, and the results of that indicated very highly concentrated holdings of water consents in terms of volume, which is itself an issue. So I have a question for the staff on this, which is, do we have, under the current regime, and also let me say that I think the use of the Sustainable Homes program, once we get that up and running, is definitely the immediate Band-Aid to this process in terms of water storage, household water storage. But do we have an obligation under the current regime or a hierarchy that says household drinking water and so forth is something we have to be more conscious of guaranteeing than irrigation water? And what's exactly the legal requirement on us in that respect?
So it's explicitly required in the Resource Management Act primary legislation itself, the primacy of drinking water supply for households and then for livestock. So it is the highest priority and therefore does need to be provided for. How that works in practice, though, is a slightly more complex question in terms of the specifics of where and when and how that.
But if our staff were to say to us, we're convinced that these heavy irrigation drawdowns are compromising drinking water provision to these households, do we have the authority to suspend or curb the irrigation drawdowns?
I would provisionally give a yes to that upon consent review, but I don't know whether you want to make any further comment on that. It would be, we have to look at what's explicitly within Plan Change 6 around those municipal allocations.
So just the one comment would be that all of these issues were traversed in great detail by the Board of Inquiry, including allocation for municipal supplies, effects of all of the takes on groundwater levels, and in any consent, localised effects are considered, as they would have been in this particular case. They can be reviewed upon new information being available, but the impact of the combined 28.5 million cubic metres of primary allocation and the 15 million cubes of secondary allocation through Tranche 2 were considered in enormous detail and contested heavily by a range of parties through the Board of Inquiry process before the Board was satisfied that an allocation in those two mixes would not compromise the sustainability of the resource or people's access to water. So that's the ground on which we're operating. Back to James's point, that's the environment the staff have to operate in. That's the policy. We recognise that the policy was developed with the proposition of water storage in operation within the environment as well. Hence our desire to review and reflect on the policy to say, is that still adequate given the current operating environment?
So we've been doing work since then, though, and are we in a position, or how far away are we from being able to say, wait a minute, we have fresh evidence as to what these impacts actually are, and we feel we have the basis of acting with more alacrity on this matter?
So there's no additional groundwater science happening in the basin, i.e. further model development yet. That's starting this year and will ramp up in earnest in year 2 of the LTP. There's obviously been ongoing groundwater level monitoring, as there is all over the region continually. So I would suggest that there's no new evidence to suggest there's anything different happening in that environment. But like I say, I go back to the proposition that the policy was developed with a different construct than the one we've got before us now. And there are a range of options and opportunities that, as Mr Palmer has pointed out, that we could consider in the short term to assist the community. There are other long-term propositions that might include policy reform. As I'd suggested at the time when I met with Mr Stevenson and the community, and at the time Mayor Butler, was that the District Council had an obligation to work with the community and consider infrastructure investment also, because the District Council were privy to and party to the Plan Change 6 process and understood well the impacts of those allocations on the groundwater resource. So this wasn't happening in a vacuum. People understood clearly the operating environment and the outcomes of it. It's just now reality is biting. And where do you go to find the solutions? And long term, I would suggest there needs to be a pretty hard look at some infrastructure investment to provide some community supplies for these villages to resolve these issues, because you're dealing with bores that were put in quite some time ago and are relatively shallow and will always be prone to impacts through groundwater level changes.
Chair, could I just add that in addition to the Ruataniwha groundwater model rework, which Mr Maxwell referred to in year 2 of the LTP, we've also got the electromagnetic survey, which has been budgeted for of the Ruataniwha Basin. So that will give us a three-dimensional view of the subsurface layers and a much better understanding of the connections between the different aquifer layers to support the model development, so we get a better understanding of the dynamics of the whole system. And we're also, at this present point in time, scoping up a project to investigate managed aquifer recharge, to take winter flows to recharge the Ruataniwha aquifer from those winter flows. So these are slightly longer term pieces of work which will all feed into a different planning framework. And so you'll just need to be patient with us in a sense that we've got 2 or 3 years of work to do to develop the longer term solutions. But in the short term, we've probably got a band-aid or two.
Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Mr.
Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got an initial question, then I just want to put a proposal. These signatories, there are 70 and 50, I think, listed. How many households, respectively, for each community do they represent? In other words, how many householders are there requiring water?
Their addresses are on there.
I appreciate that, but some of them are obviously from the one household. So I'm asking, how many households does 70 signatories represent in...
Well, I can give you the count for Onga.
Yeah, what's that?
Because I canvassed Onga myself.
So how many households?
85.
85 households?
Yep.
And for Tikokino?
I'm not sure. We took it to the pub.
Sure. So we're at 50.
Works as well as he.
50
But I put it,
signatories.
and we put it in the school, and we've got a Facebook
I appreciate
thing.
that, but does anyone...
Bigger or smaller than Onga?
Sorry.
Bigger.
Tikokino is getting to be bigger than Onga because there's more housing going on there now.
We've had 12 new homes that are all digging bores.
Sure, no, I appreciate that, but how many currently households?
I'd say about 100.
100 households, okay. Well, my question now is to perhaps Mr Maxwell and to Mr Palmer as well. You're looking at doing some groundwater monitoring. How many is the potential to have groundwater monitoring in close proximity to these 2 communities to leverage off that significant infrastructure, leverage off our funds available for the individual households for water storage, to put a community scheme together between those respective opportunities? Is there a deal we can do? Because it's all very well looking at the future and future tranches outcomes, but we're going to have some quite smelly and thirsty people from Tikokino and Onga next year. So let's see what we can do.
So we already have monitoring in the area, and I was just going to jump online to see if we'd find the nearest bore. There are groundwater monitoring bores all through that area. I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly where they are. Look, in terms of a community scheme, and I'm sure Mr Palmer will have a view as well, all of these things are possible. Somebody has to pay, is the issue.
Yeah, but if we're dropping a bore somewhere, well, we might be able to leverage off it. That's the point.
We couldn't put in a monitoring bore and pretend it was a community supply bore. They're quite different propositions. Our monitor bores
Why is that?
They're typically very, very small, very simple construction.
But what I'm saying is that we're needing to monitor things, we're needing to sink a bore, and if the good folk of Tikokino said, well, we'll give you an extra $13.50 and to make it bigger, do we have a deal?
So and like I say, we wouldn't construct a monitor bore and use it for a municipal supply. The two are mutually exclusive. We couldn't do that. We would either put in a monitoring bore or we would put in a bore for town supply. We wouldn't have one that was combined to do both. They don't. It doesn't work in practice. But there is, somebody could turn up and put in a municipal supply bore, and as I had advocated at the time when we met with ex-Mayor Butler, that was the District Council's role, and we would support them, and could support them in terms of investigations of where, locations, depths, all of those things that would make the bore reliable and secure, but it wasn't our place to provide infrastructure for water supplies. It was a territorial authority.
Why wouldn't that bore have exactly the same problem as these guys already got?
Because it's about depth. It's simply about the resource. The resource is available. It's just depth that's the issue because of fluctuations of groundwater levels during the summer.
I heard one of you say that you've got a neighbour that's got a 60-metre deep
60
bore
metre
and
deep
that's
bore.
got the same problem.
So we don't have 60-metre groundwater fluctuations in the Ruataniwha Basin. So there may well be another issue with that bore that we're unaware of in terms of its age or construction.
The owner of that bore is actually a plumber, and that's what he does for a job. And he said that he's got the decision, his only choice is to do tanks or go further down.
So
it's running out of water.
Without getting into a debate about the whys and wherefores, we don't have any evidence to suggest that we're getting groundwater declines of that magnitude in the area. Certainly it's not reflected in our monitoring network. But the point is that, as I think you've seen in a number of presentations that the staff have made to you around groundwater levels fluctuate during the summer as a result of a reduction in recharge and abstraction. So they go down and then in the winter they recharge and levels come back up. And it's the level to which they go down to that's the issue. It's a very similar problem to the one that the Bridge Park community faced some years ago because of the result of a combination of recharge and abstraction, seeing groundwater level declines, going lower than they had in the past, meaning that the shallow bores were unable to access water. So a deeper bore was put in to get to the resource, which is still there, it's just deeper, and then reticulated to the community by the Hastings District Council then at the time.
But they're not coming back up as much as they were, are they? Every year they're going like this.
So off the top of my head again, I couldn't tell you in terms of exactly which bore is doing what, but we don't have evidence of ongoing declines in groundwater level across the Ruataniwha Basin. There's no mining of the resource occurring under the current operating environment.
And where is the Ruataniwha Basin go to and from?
The Ruataniwha Basin's a large area of some tens of thousands of hectares across.
Does it go as far as Takapau?
I could show you a map. Yes, it does.
It does. Well, I know the Takapau bores are dropping a metre a year, not being replenished.
So again, at the risk of getting into debate about the science here, there's no evidence of mining of groundwater across the Ruataniwha Basin. And I'll just reinforce that this issue was traversed at great length and great levels of scientific detail and great levels of scrutiny by the Board of Inquiry. The science around groundwater was heavily contested by a range of parties, and what we've got in terms of an allocation, both in the let's call it tranche 1, the 28.5 million cubic metres, and the 15 million cubic metres of tranche 2, was considered by the board, and the effects of that thoroughly explored, and the board decided and agreed on that allocation. From a staff perspective,
Anyway, look,
that's
we-
what we've got to work with.
Sorry, I'm not a scientist, but we have people in the village that when the potato farm that's across the other side of the road, if it's irrigating, we don't get water out of our taps, and if it's not irrigating, we get water out of our taps. You don't need to be a scientist to figure out that that's affecting that, do you?
And again, it's what we call a localised effect, and it's probably a product of the depth of the bore. And it's very hard to consider this in the abstract without the actual details of these things at hand. And I'm not questioning that these things don't occur. It's just the issue being the overall allocation and the sustainability of the resource.
So if I can get you some information that proves that those bores are dropping, that are monitored bores, and that I know of that are dropping, do I send that directly to you?
Very happy to have a discussion
Okay.
about any information.
Team, we have to bring this to close because we've got
Sorry.
a tight agenda all day. But I really do respect your passion. I mean, running out of water is the most dreadful thing that can happen. So we understand your passion about this, and I just hope that you can understand that around this table that people are with you on this. We've got to find a solution.
Definitely.
Short-term
Thank you very
and
much for
long-term
listening
solutions.
to us.
And Tom's point, yes, Debbie, you want to move to...
Yes, I'll move recommendations 1 and 2, and I'd like to speak to them.
Do we have a seconder? Second defendant. Oh, second defendant had his hand up.
Lots of seconders.
Okay, there are lots of seconders. So, Debbie?
Catherine and Bill, thank you both for coming and sharing your heartfelt distress with us today. It's really important that we as councillors do keep in touch with the community, and Bill, I'd like to acknowledge your ongoing leadership because I hear from Bill really very frequently, and one of the challenges of Onga is there's either too much water or not enough, isn't it, in the small community. So it's an ongoing annual dialogue, year-round dialogue. One of the important things that has come out, and it's been raised again, I know we've discussed it before, Bill, is the partnership that needs to exist with the District Council, and as Mr Maxwell had said, they appeared to be lacking in the Board of Inquiry process in representing communities such as yourselves during the Plan Change 6, and the pain you are suffering is quite likely a direct result of that. So I'm sure that won't be the ongoing case, but it is important to be keeping that we're all working together on the same waka with this, and I think we've heard some really good short-term and long-term sustainable solutions today, and a genuine willingness and desire to keep ongoing drinking water, access to drinking water as reliable as possible. So I take heart in the fact that I think the whole team here is on board with this and working on your behalf, and I would just like to once again acknowledge your tremendous passion and determination in continuing to bring this to our attention.
Please write it and don't make it 2 or 3 years before we have an answer. I think that's the critical point.
Yeah, Fenton wishes to speak.
Oh, just very quickly, thank you, Mr Stevenson. Guys, hopefully you brought this to a head now with the petition. You're sick of various chairmen, various mayors traipsing up and down to meet you in halls and turn the tap on, nothing comes out, all that stuff. And that's gone on for years. I think, unless I misheard Councillor Barker, he first got involved in 1954. I mean, it's taken quite some time. So, look, good work, and it's time for us to deliver something for you. I get that.
Get the whip out.
Yeah.
Paul.
Thank you, Chair. It's pretty clear to me that this whole issue is symptomatic of privatising the profits and socialising the costs, because the people that get affected are the residents of Onga and Tiko, because for some reason or another, for whatever reason we've allocated water out of the aquifer to private businesses for the making of money. And you guys are the ones that are having to bear the cost of that, which is really, really unfortunate. And it just goes to show some of the holes some of the issues that we have to deal with are not particularly easy, and that we're having to make decisions that perhaps aren't the most rational and sensible, because we're stuck with legislation that we have to deal with. So, yeah, to me, it's a straight-out issue of privatising the profits and socialising the losses or costs.
Paul, are there any other speakers? Do you wish to wind up, or are you happy?
No, just your time hasn't been wasted here this morning.
So all those in favour of accepting?
Aye.
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 Against? Yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you very much for letting
Thank
us
you very
come.
much for listening to us.
Pleasure. Okay, now we're going to have to move to item 14 now because it was 11 o'clock. I don't know how because we've got Blair and Todd here.
Yes, we do.
So we need to move into public excluded to discuss port transaction.
I'll move. Happy to second.
Moved, second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? We have one opposed.
Yeah, I'd be the same on that too.
Two opposed?
Yep. Stuff it, this isn't bloody secret.
I'd like to speak to the motion.
It's procedural motion.
Procedural motion.
It's
I'm not seconding the
Lost.
motion. I'm just,
it's lost.
before you voted without any debate on the issue.
It's a procedural motion, Chair. No debate.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have thought so. No, we're moving into public excluded. We have two people opposed to that, and for very good reasons. I understand that. It's a topical point in New Zealand at the moment, but nevertheless, on this issue, we have moved. So, Huggy, sorry, you're out of the room.
Go walk along the seafront.
Yeah, go and have a cup of tea.
What, 15?
I think it might be a bit longer than that.
23.